Welcome to Subject Soup. Why is one of the world's largest economies struggling with low average salaries? The answer might surprise you. Let's uncover the truth behind China's wage puzzle. Why is the average salary in mainland China only $192 a month? Let's break it down. Hey everyone! Today, we're diving into a fascinating topic that gets people scratching their heads. Why do some say the average salary in mainland China is as low as $192 a month? Spoiler alert, it's not exactly true. But stick with me, because the story behind this number is way more interesting than you'd expect. Okay, so here's the deal. The average salary in mainland China isn't $192 a month, it's actually much higher. According to official data, the average annual salary in urban areas is about 120,000 yuan, which works out to roughly $16,600 per year, or around $1,385 per month. That's a far cry from $192, right? So where does that lower number come from? Let me explain. If you dig into the statistics a little more, you'll find that the average salary is skewed by several factors, including the large number of lower-paying jobs in certain sectors and regions. While urban centers like Shanghai or Beijing have salaries that are above the national average, rural areas are pulling the average down with much lower incomes. It's important to note that national average figures can sometimes mislead us into thinking that the whole country shares the same economic conditions, when in reality, there's a vast difference from one region to another. Moreover, this average doesn't account for certain segments of the workforce. For instance, people who work in informal sectors, temporary positions, or on short-term contracts might be earning far less than the official figures show. So when we talk about averages, we need to recognize that they can often gloss over the inequalities present in the data. But still, even with these disparities, China's average salary is substantially higher than the $192 figure often cited. To put it simply, the claim of $192 a month is misleading. It doesn't reflect the reality of wages in China today. If we look at the more accurate numbers, we get a better sense of the true economic picture in urban China, where wages are much higher. It's easy to see how misunderstandings or outdated figures could make people believe that China's average salary is as low as $192, but we've got to dig deeper to see the full picture. China is a big country, like, really big, and there's a huge economic divide between urban and rural areas. In major cities like Shanghai and Beijing, average salaries can hit $1,800 to $2,000 a month. These are some of the wealthiest regions in China, with robust industries in finance, technology, and high-end services that pay well. These cities also have a higher cost of living, which means higher salaries are necessary to keep up with things like rent, transportation, and general living expenses. But head out to rural regions, and it's a whole different story. In less developed areas, the cost of living is much lower, but so are the wages. People in these areas might earn as little as $500 a month, or even less, for similar jobs in agriculture or manufacturing. While this doesn't necessarily mean that people are living in poverty, it does highlight a significant gap in income between urban and rural workers. This regional disparity is a big factor when you look at national averages. For example, the wages in rural regions pull down the overall average, making it seem as though the average salary in China is lower than it actually is. The reality is that people living in urban centers have access to better-paying jobs and higher wages, while those in rural areas earn significantly less. This contrast is one of the reasons why understanding salary averages in China requires looking beyond just the numbers. What's happening in China is not unusual. Many large countries with diverse regions experienced similar disparities. Think of the U.S., where incomes in New York or California far exceed those in rural Appalachia. When you zoom in on the data, you can see that these averages are influenced by where people live, and in China, it's no different. Rural areas are still catching up in terms of economic development, which keeps the overall salary figures lower than what you might find in a city like Beijing. Let's talk jobs. If you're in tech or finance in China, you're probably living pretty comfortably. These industries offer monthly salaries that can range from $2,000 to $3,000, and for top-tier professionals or managers, it can be even more. Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Beijing are the epicenters for technology and financial sectors in China, and companies in these fields tend to pay well to attract and retain talent. The higher-paying industries not only offer better pay but also come with more benefits, perks, and opportunities for career advancement. But if you're in agriculture, manufacturing, or service jobs, you might be earning a lot less. These industries tend to be more labor-intensive and offer lower wages on average. In fact, many people in the manufacturing or construction sectors might make somewhere around $700 to $1,000 a month, depending on the region and type of work. While these jobs are essential to the economy, they don't come with the same paychecks or benefits as those in tech or finance. The stark differences in salaries across industries show how the economy in China is still evolving. In some ways, China's economy mirrors that of other industrializing nations where blue-collar jobs are still commonplace in certain sectors while white-collar jobs are increasingly concentrated in urban hubs. As China continues to modernize, we may see even more of a focus on technology and finance, which could help boost wages in the long term. But for now, this split between industries, high-paying tech jobs versus low-paying factory or agricultural jobs, definitely shapes the average salary numbers. If you're in the right industry, you can earn a lot more, but if you're not, the pay can be much lower. It's all about where you work and what kind of work you're doing. And this imbalance plays a key role in why the average salary doesn't seem as high as it could be. Now, here's another curveball. Minimum wages in China vary a ton depending on where you are. In cities like Beijing and Shanghai, the minimum wage is set around 2,400 yuan per month, while in less developed areas, the figure might be closer to 1,500 yuan or lower. The regional differences in minimum wage levels are a reflection of both the cost of living and the economic conditions in each area. For example, living in Beijing or Shanghai is expensive, like really expensive. Rent is sky-high, food costs more, and services are pricier. People who live in these cities need to earn more to afford even basic necessities. On the other hand, in rural areas, life tends to be cheaper. People don't have to spend as much on rent or food, which means that lower wages don't necessarily translate to poverty, although they can still be a challenge. It's also important to recognize that the minimum wage isn't always a reflection of the real wages people earn. Many people make above the minimum wage, especially in urban areas. But the presence of lower minimum wages in rural regions helps bring down the national average, making the figures seem much lower than they are in cities. This is another reason why the average salary number can be misleading. It's not that everyone is making a low wage, but that the lower minimums in certain regions drag down the overall average. In the end, China's wage landscape is shaped by both regional economic differences and varying living costs. The average salary figures tell only part of the story. People in the country's richest cities may earn significantly more, but the national average ends up being brought down by lower wages in less developed areas. When you consider both the wages and the cost of living, the situation becomes a little clearer. Oh, and don't forget the role of government policies. In recent years, China has been trying to narrow the income gap, but there's still a lot of work to do. For example, in January 2025, the Chinese government announced it would cut salaries for employees and top financial regulators by about half. The move is meant to align these wages with other civil servants and reduce the income disparity between public sector and private sector workers. It's a clear indication that China is aware of the growing wage gap and is working to address it. Additionally, China has faced criticism over labor practices, particularly in industries like manufacturing, where workers are often on temporary contracts. This system, known as labor dispatch, allows employers to avoid paying full benefits or offering job security, which leads to lower wages for workers. This system is especially common in industries like e-commerce, where workers are paid by the hour and may not receive benefits like health insurance or paid leave. These labor practices contribute to the perception of low wages in China. Many workers, especially in the informal economy, earn less than they would if they were employed full-time with all the benefits that come with it. This contributes to the overall income inequality and makes the national wage figures seem lower than they might be if all workers had equal rights and benefits. So while the government is taking steps to address income inequality and improve labor conditions, there's still a long way to go. These policies, along with the influence of temporary work and wage discrepancies across sectors, make the wage situation in China a bit more complicated than what the headlines might suggest. The $192 figure might come from outdated data, selective reporting, or a misunderstanding of how averages work. It's kind of like saying the average number of pets people have is 1.2. Sounds weird, right? That's averages for you. They can hide a lot of nuance. So while it's true that some people in China might be earning very low wages, the national average is much higher, especially when you look at urban areas. This number is also misleading because it doesn't account for the regional variations in income. If you take into account that people in cities earn far more than those in rural areas, the figure starts to make a lot more sense. What people often forget is that an average is just that. It's not the norm for everyone. Some people make a lot more, some make a lot less, but that middle ground ends up shaping the overall statistic. Moreover, the $192 myth might come from comparing salaries in China to those in Western countries, where wages are often much higher. But China's economy is different, and the cost of living is much lower in many areas. This difference in living costs, along with the regional wage discrepancies, means that $192 a month might sound low, but it doesn't tell the whole story of how people are actually living in China. So, the next time you hear someone say, people in China only make $192 a month, you can hit them with the facts. It's not that simple, and now you know why. The reality is much more complex, and by understanding the different factors at play, you'll be able to get a much clearer picture of China's economy. In reality, China's average salaries are much higher than $192, but there are still huge disparities between regions and industries. Understanding this helps us see the bigger picture of China's rapidly changing economy and why numbers don't always tell the full story. So, the next time you hear someone spouting that $192 figure, you can break it down and show them the real story. It's a great reminder that in economics, it's always important to look beyond the surface and understand the factors that shape the numbers. Thanks for hanging out and learning something new with me today. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more fun dives into economics, history, and everything in between. Catch you in the next one. If you've been enjoying the content and finding it helpful or interesting, I'd love to have you join our community by subscribing to the channel. It's completely free and helps the channel grow so I can keep bringing you even more awesome content. No pressure, but your support means the world to me. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you.